Hi everyone, it's William here. It's Sunday, so today I'm using my Christian name, Dmitri, and I'm freshly back from Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral in Portland, Oregon. So if you ever find yourself in Portland on a Sunday, you should come for the liturgy, and you might very well see me there, although you might not recognize me without my Swiss cap on. Okay, anyway, things are definitely simpler now that we're doing just 1915. And our recap for yesterday, it was the 14th, and Dmitri was out on the town going to a number of places, but he visited two different women at the Hotel Europe, one earlier in the day and then one late at night after he left the theater. And he took with him a friend, or the friend took Dmitri with him, I don't know which. Well, they went together. Napoleon Murat, sort of notorious playboy and dashing guards officer type, and they met up with a woman whom I'm sure Dmitri's has misspelled her name, Mademoiselle Suzile. What on earth could that be? Suzile. And he wasn't really usually at all interested in the mademoiselle. He liked the mesdames. But anyway, he says they had a lively time, a good old time, the three of them. And he didn't get home till 6 a.m., which is relevant for today's diary entry. Our cast today, we have the two doctors, and we have at a distance, the author Lodiziensky. So this is interesting because you remember Dmitri had started this sort of occult trilogy written by Lodiziensky. The first one was called Superconsciousness, and he finished that right away. He just devoured it. The second one was called Invisible Light, or The Light Invisible, and he had started that his last couple of days in Usovo, but it had to be put on hold then, I guess, while he was traveling to Moscow and then to Petrograd. And I've been complaining the last few diary entries that he tells us every day that he's reading, but he doesn't tell us what. And so now we find out that he's continuing on with this trilogy. All right. It is the 15th/28th of February, Petrograd, Nevsky 41, -3 degrees and overcast. There's no mention of some event, major event in the imperial family that I believe occurred on the 15th. I could be wrong. This is the 15th old style, and that is the death of Uncle Kostya, Grand Duke Konstantinovich. So either I have the date wrong or the news hadn't reached Dmitri yet, because I think he was genuinely fond of Uncle Kostya. Okay, here we go. I slept well, but extremely little. In the first place, I returned home very late, and in the second place, my tooth ached terribly and kept me up for a long time. I woke up at 10 o'clock. Polyakov and Ostrogorsky came around 11 o'clock and began the operation. This time it was much easier. Burns in the nose are almost insensible. It's just that there was a smell of burning flesh, and dark smoke came from my nostrils. That was ridiculous and unpleasant. And then the cocaine gave me a headache, but it was very mild. After lunch, I went back to bed. I slept until 6 o'clock and had tea in bed. Then I got up. I dined alone at 8:30, then read Invisible Light by Lodiziensky. It's interesting and very well written. Around 11 o'clock, GM came to my apartment and we played poker. I taught him the basic rules of the game, then I had tea alone and went to bed around 12 o'clock. It's good that there's encouraging news about the war. Okay, I forgot to mention poor GM when I went through our cast list for today. So this sounds like, forget the tonsillectomy with not much anesthesia, or the burning flesh in the nose. What makes me cringe about this one is that he had to get up after getting home at 6 a.m. after having been up with the toothache. Sounds like he got at most 3 hours sleep. But anyway, he had this scheduled well, procedure, not really an operation, cauterization of the nose. So I had to look that up and see how that was done and why it was done. So it was done with some kind of, now I can't remember, some kind of stick with chemical, caustic or chemical substance, or it was done with just a heated wire. I don't know. What I read online said it was painful, but I think cocaine was actually a better form of anesthesia than I initially realized, because when I looked that up, and Dmitri had had cocaine in his throat for his tonsillectomy, and that was the only anesthesia. But and he said it, that it hurt like crazy, but apparently it was not bad as anesthesia went, and so that's what they used. This time it gave him a mild headache. Thank heavens he wasn't a regular, or as far as I know, ever a user of cocaine. One of the things that his son, Prince Ilinsky, and I had talked about was that that Prince Ilinsky, in the book, at that time I was thinking I would be writing a biography, not a novel. That if there was any evidence of Dmitri being a drug addict, that would bother him, that he didn't want his grandchildren to find out about that until, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, he pretty much gave me carte blanche and said, write about whatever you want, but this is the thing that would bother me. And I told him, well, I've never seen any hints that Dmitri was using any kind of drugs. He drank and he smoked, and those were, and he picked up sex workers sometimes. Those were his vices, and gambling. Okay, end of list. Those were his vices. Drugs were not. And in fact, I as I mentioned yesterday, I rather wonder if it wasn't because of maybe opium use in plain sight that he was said that he wasn't going to go back to Ugolik, the little nightclub that he'd gone to the night before. Anyway, so why cauterization of the nose? Well, the main thing apparently is that it's used for is people who have chronic nosebleeds. And so that could have been the case with Dmitri. I have chronic nosebleeds when I'm at altitude. I actually, this year I didn't. I finally seem to have gotten beyond that. If I go up in the Alps, almost every year I have a nosebleed, a few nosebleeds when I first get there, and then I get used to it. This year I didn't, so hopefully that is no longer a thing. So, this would explain a lot, though. If Dmitri, for whatever reason, had, what you would call idiopathic nosebleeds, this would explain why some people, like Natalia Brasova, looked at him and saw blood on his handkerchief and thought, oh, he's got tuberculosis. So anyway, they may have cauterized his nose for that reason, or they may have done it because he says that in a week's time, he'd said earlier that a week after the nose cauterization, he was going to have surgery to correct deviated septum. So we'll see if that goes forward. In the meantime, so it wouldn't be the whole nose. They're not going to be, burning the entire interior of his nose. But if it had been determined that chronic nosebleeds had originated from a particular part of the nose, that's the part that they would have cauterized. Okay, anyway, I like the way he refers to it as ridiculous to see black smoke coming from his nose, almost like a dragon, right? I mean, he was a smoker. I'm sure sometimes he had smoke coming from his nose, but he wouldn't have been smelling, how does he put it, burning flesh and seeing black smoke. And yeah, kind of funny. So Lodizhensky, the occult trilogy, I mentioned that. This was the second of the three books. The first one was Superconsciousness. The third one, which I don't know if you went on to read or not, was called Dark Forces, very ominous. I actually have the first one, and I started reading it with great enthusiasm and found it interesting. But then I got into diving into research about the Young Russia Party, so I kind of got sidelined from that. Poker. So GM shows up. Well, you know the absence of Maria is notable because she had her own apartment, clearly at the Sergei Palace, and she, under ordinary circumstances, would have been there, spending time with Dmitri that day and that evening. But since she's gone off to Pskov, she's not there, and so it's George Laming who comes into the apartment, and they play some cards together. Poker. I don't know how popular poker was in Russia. It seems to have been maybe relatively new because Dmitri has to teach it to George. Yeah. So I don't know. The Lamings, George and Maria, and their son, when he wasn't at school, Boris, who was 7 years younger than Dmitri, they had an apartment as well in the Sergei Palace. And Laming hasn't been much of a presence lately, you know. Dmitri's been sort of doing his own thing, and I believe he was still considered not fully an adult. He still, at age 25, he would have complete control over his estate and his finances, but until then, not. There was still some supervision, and I'm not sure if Laming had been entrusted with that, with, you know, checking the accounts and that sort of thing, or if Dmitri had just kept him on because he was, you know, a comfortable person. He was like a parent. He'd been with Dmitri since Dmitri was 10, I believe. Yeah, I don't know. Either way, he was a presence and would continue to be a presence until Dmitri's banishment. Yeah, okay, so what do we have next time? Well, we have some interesting visitors. Now, Dmitri is going to go late in the day to his favorite place, the yacht club, but aside from that, he's going to be staying at home, and he's going to have a couple of interesting visitors, a man and a woman, and then this very close friend of his, insofar as Dmitri had really close friends. Shagubatov was his name, and if you've been watching the videos all along, you are familiar with him from 1921, and he was actually, in 1915, he was Dmitri's military adjutant. Yeah, even though Dmitri was only a captain, by virtue of being a Grand Duke, he had this adjutant. And they were also friends. You know, they did things together. Like in Paris, they would go eat together, just the two of them and that sort of thing. But Shagubatov, even though I don't believe he was being paid in Paris, was still kind of acting as the adjutant. When Dmitri went to the south of France with Coco Chanel, Shagubatov had the key to his apartment and kind of, you know, kept an eye on things. So we will be meeting him for the first time tomorrow in the diaries. Yeah, so I hope to see you then. Bye.